Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. This is the podcast for marketers who want to make their way into leadership. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I am joined by Misha Salkinder. You made it to day 3. I know it's been a marathon. Misha, thank you for hanging in there. Let's talk about why you shouldn't over-engineer your attribution model.
Mm-hmm.
This is dangerous territory, and I'm excited to wander into it.
Likewise. Let's do it.
So, what are some signs? Let me step back for a minute. Before we change an attribution model, what are the kinds of questions we should ask when people are saying it's wrong and we need to do X, Y, or Z differently?
There are times when tuning an attribution model to answer a specific question is a good idea. I'll say that. I'm a big fan of it. I think as you grow with your attribution or analytics journey, I think the really good leaders in this space don't just take a model as is. They think about, what are the inputs, and is it telling us the right? Is it answering the right question with the right methodology? So I'll just preface with that. With that said, I've seen many organizations start their attribution journey, or even be well on it, but trying to have attribution match their expectations. So it doesn't start with a question, but rather it almost starts with the answer, and then it says, well, let's have the model give us that answer. Let's have the data give us that answer. And that, to me, is slightly dangerous territory. Because what happens in engineering attribution models is you can tune the weights to tell the story you want to tell. You can remove or include events to tell the story you want to tell. But I think that you might be stepping away from what is actually happening, or from an actual utility of the model when that happens.
I'm putting back on my sales engineer and onboarding hat, but one of the questions I like to ask is, what are you trying to solve? What's broken? Who's pushing back, and why? Because I think the two things I saw that were the biggest red flags were, one, we want to weight something heavier because we spend more money on it. And two, I want to get credit, in air quotes, too, so I need my activity to show up. The problem with that is you need to keep in mind, like you said, what are you using a particular model to answer? So if we're trying to figure out, of all of the most meaningful touch points, which are connected to winning deals, I was never a fan of including website data. And this confused a lot of people, but I never viewed that as a meaningful touch. I wanted to focus on hand raises or things where people were actively saying, I want to do that. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't also have a model that focused on website data as it related to opportunities. That was to help me answer a different question. So I think there's red flags, there's green flags, and then there's times when we say, like you said, there's absolutely utility in doing that. For example, you mentioned, I think yesterday, that your attribution model can blow up with high volume touch points that may not necessarily be as meaningful as some of the transactional touch points, website visits, for example.
Yeah. I would say even email clicks will probably fall in the same category for me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, is there utility in looking at that data? Yes. Probably not when you're talking about what's most effective at generating pipeline and bookings.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know you're a big fan of even weighted models, and I am as well. There's something to be said about, particularly in the validation phase of attribution models, to be able to do the math very easily. You have a $10,000 opportunity, you have two touches, and so the logic behind it all starts making sense that each one of those has 5,000. So just I get particularly weary when a model gets over-engineered using weights, right? We can have a conversation about what data should and should not be included. And as to your point, there are certain touches that are high volume, and we might, one solution is not include them ever. Another solution might be, well, can we identify the really high intent signals and only parse those out? Let's say you have a specific web page that's ungated, but we really want those. That would be, I think, a really interesting move. But to say, oh no, sales is not going to buy into this, so we need to give them higher weight, to their touch points. At that point, I get a little bit concerned because it's a matter of there are better levers, I think, to move, which are better tracking, perhaps better campaign membership recording, right? All these things that can help you include more of the high value touch points in your model, which will make it'll live longer, right? It'll be useful for much, much longer than if you say, oh no, we're going to times 10 the value of these touches.
There was a phrase there you used, sales will never believe it, or sales doesn't trust it. That is, I've found at the root of many engineering journeys where we're trying to get another department's buy-in because we pulled up attribution, they pulled up a specific deal, and then they blew it up. I think that's why I like to ask, who has a problem with this model and why? Because if it's the sales team, you need to have a completely different evaluation happen. Are you including their activity? Are they expecting to get air quotes credit? Is that the main problem? Or should we not be talking in terms of absolute dollars in front of them and just say, this has X times more likelihood than this thing to help push a deal over the finish line? I think that's such an interesting call out. And I have you seen that as well? We're bringing sales into it, just kind of.
Yes, two thoughts come to mind. One is that I know we spoke yesterday on funnels, and this is exactly why the lines between the two models really blur for me. It is well possible that splitting dollar amounts between a number of touches it gives you certain answers that could be useful tactically, but it is well possible that on one screen you need to look at attribution models, and on the other screen you might want to look at funnel analytics to see what volumes are we talking about here. Oh wait, sales is getting a ton of attribution. Well, maybe you've put really strong limits on what kind of marketing touches you're allowing to include, but you're not doing so on the sales touches. So, right, that could very much happen. The other thought I had was, I guess, a recommendation for the marketers out there. Whenever you're presenting an attribution model or any data that's the output of attribution models in front of sales, or maybe in general in your organization, typically the first screens that come up are kind of overview screens. Here's my attribution for the quarter as a whole. I would recommend it take steps back and actually show the workings of attribution, show an event timeline, and saying, here's an opportunity, and here are the 5 touches, and here's how it was distributed. I think explaining, even at the most basic level, how it works can help so much with the buy-in of these hopefully non-over-engineered attribution models when you look at them in aggregate, right? Oh yeah, this touch, we're getting attribution to this touch because it's in this window, or we probably really didn't consider a long enough sales cycle. There are levers to that you can influence and move, but they're really hard to see when you're looking at data in aggregate without actually digging into an example or two to see how the model functions.
I think the thing that really pops to mind here is so many marketers bring in attribution and treat it as a marketing project and then try to display the data and use it cross-functionally. And by that, I mean, here's our share versus sales, and they don't involve the sales team. I'm not even saying don't try to incorporate sales data and talk about it that way. You can't do it in a silo. It's never going to work, ever. I think another thing I'd love to touch on is the even weighted piece. So that actually comes from years of trying to explain multi-touch attribution and failing.
Mm.
It's a really complex topic. So I tend to favor models that are more straightforward to explain and then remove touch points. Like I think in one of our models, we included solutions pages and maybe a couple other pages on the website, but everything else was excluded.
Mm.
What was really critical was the ability to say this is an estimate. Sales agrees, they're okay with this model, and we use it to make these decisions. Then you have credibility. But I feel like trying to go it alone is just misstep number one.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if I were to roll out attribution modeling for an organization, one of the first stakeholders I would get are the end users. And likely that includes someone from sales. Saying, I want to build this right for you to be useful. So I want to start from the very get-go. What are the touches? For example, one thing, marketing is known for their kind of granularity and tracking. And then we lump in, at least from my experience, there's a sales campaign, if you can get your data on it, that kind of just gets generated. And so you have a huge bucket of sales versus this granular data of marketing. Well, if you can actually help sales, can we go to like a cadence level for you? Can we help you get as well versed in the kind of the tracking of smaller campaigns for your own communication, for your own back and forth? If we can get to that, then all of a sudden you have a really true stakeholder that is interested in looking at the data, because they might make a decision of, they can all of a sudden say, well, interesting, these kinds of communications seem to work better than these in these stages of the funnel.
Yeah. That's
right.
great.
As opposed to a question of us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
We have a bucket of this and we're going to try to optimize this and maybe lower the value of it so that they feel better. Oh, you can actually use analytical tools and data to help optimize sales motions as well.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to be rowing the boat in order to cross the finish line. So it's not a matter of credit or how much credit. It's, can we figure out what's working and what isn't?
Mm-hmm.
I like that. So I'm thinking through onboarding scenarios, and it was really interesting to me. I think it's just human nature. We would talk to maybe demand gen and operations, and they would be adamant. We are just using this for campaign optimization. We're just going to focus on marketing activity. We're not going to use it externally. The minute the VP of marketing or CMO came on the line and I asked, what are you planning on using this for? They immediately would say, well, I want to take it into the boardroom. And I'm like, well, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Word of the wise, if you are looking at attribution, talk to everybody and see how they're going to use it so you can get in front of those landmines before they pitch it to sales and then won't use it anymore because sales didn't like it.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the, where these things can blow up often have to do with expectations and mismanaged expectations and working in silos. So like many things in life, I think it all starts with expectation setting and communication. It's amazing the data that exists out there today. So I think it's just the willingness to go and find out what would be useful. Because if you have the right solution in place, you probably have the flexibility to build useful models for both sides of the org.
I like it. Misha, thanks so much for stopping by the podcast. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you to network?
Yeah, Misha Salkinder on LinkedIn or misha@CaliberMind.com. I would always love to chat. I like thinking about where analytics in our space is going, getting ideas for how we can better the solution. So would love to hear from you.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out CaliberMind.com.